Today I'm going to show you how I use Cursor and Claude AI together to create components for Adobe's document authoring with Edge delivery services. This is a really powerful combination that brings a senior developer to your team and makes working with Adobe's Edge delivery services a real joy. So I shall start by showing you how I configure Cursor to make it the AI-enabled tool that it is. Cursor is a clone of Microsoft Visual Studio Code. It can't just be a plugin because Cursor works very, very deeply under the covers. So therefore the Cursor company made a clone and copied everything out of Visual Studio, which is an open source software, and they have added a Cursor settings column to the settings box. So in Cursor settings, things that you must set up to be able to use it for AI is that you must have an account. Obviously, Cursor is making money out of its AI, and it has costs against people like Anthropic, who run Claude, etc. So it too needs to raise funds. So when you have an account with Claude, with Cursor, every month you pay $20, exactly the same as the account with Claude. Claude, you pay $20. So you end up paying $40 a month to run this combination, which I think is a bargain. It is a clone of Visual Studio Code, so everything that was in Visual Studio Code works inside Cursor. You can import all of your settings, all of your keystrokes, everything that you use from your current Visual Studio Code and move it into Cursor, and therefore there is no downtime, no learning time. You just use the editor as you always have with added AI advantages. So Cursor lets you have simple rules for AI. These rules will always get shown to the AI on all chats, all Command K sessions, everything that you do with the AI. These rules will always be sent. Now, these two things that really need for me, one is that I always use await in Node.js async code, and I use the Airbnb style guide for code. These two things are pretty important for me, so I've made sure that no matter what environment I'm working with, no matter how I've set up Cursor, these two commands will always be sent to the AI. You can include a Cursor rules file, and I recommend that you do this. The Cursor rules file is a large file, which can well, it's up to you how large it can be. It's a file that you create with rules to follow, and you tell the AI exactly what you want it to do. It's a standard operating procedures file, and in here you explain how your JavaScript works, how your CSS works, how your documentation works, what JSON files look like. You tell it everything that you need for a project that you're going to create. There is nothing in here that's specific to any requirement. It is the standard operating procedure rules for any Franklin type project that I'm going to be working with. So back to the settings. Cursor settings, Cursor settings. The switch it on or off. If it's on, it's included with every prompt that's sent to the AI. If it's off, it's removed. So depending whether you're working on something that wants this rules AI or not, you can switch it on or off. Now, I have multiple rules.ai. I have a rules.ai for Edge delivery services. I have a rules.ai for Node.js. I have a rules.ai for HTML generation. And I have a separate GitHub repository which contains all of my prompts, all of my rules, all of my AI configuration. And I merge that in with my current projects and cherry pick the rules.ai that I want and the prompt structures that I want to make it all work for me. So there's a few other things that you can change in this section. I don't bother. Those are the things that you need. The simple rules and the Cursor rules, switch them on. You can choose which models you would like to use in your AI. Here, for instance, I am using Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I have found this to be the best model, so I've switched that one on and switched everything else off. And if you are using OpenAI, you can put in an OpenAI API key, and if you're using Anthropic, you can use your own Anthropic key. Because I've got a Cursor Pro subscription, I do not need to use my own Anthropic key. I could turn off the Anthropic key. I could switch off all of this because I'm paying $20 to Cursor. But I'm keeping this in case I decide just to go raw and not use Cursor but go straight in with Anthropic. The features that you switch on are whether you want to use Cursor Tab. Cursor Tab was previously known as Copilot++, and this is where Cursor does the work that Copilot used to do with a little bit more flair. I have cancelled my Copilot subscription since finding Cursor, and I really like it. So Cursor Tab, I enable it. Partial Accepts, I enable it. Cursor Predictions, I enable it. Triggering comments, enable. Auto import, I don't auto import things. I've disabled that. In Composer, I have enabled this. Composer is the magic that makes Cursor create things from scratch and will create files for you and move things around in your repository. In the olden days, Composer wasn't switched on by default. And it was something that you had to switch on, and you had to have a professional subscription before you could do this. You get 1 month free trial, I believe, but once again, you have to come here, switch on the Composer, and make it live. You have the option to add documentation. I have got some documentation called EDS notes. This is Edge Delivery Services, the notes that are used for Edge Delivery Services. And if I just fire that up and look for what the file is, it's telling me it's this file on the internet, which is on my allabout.network. These are the instructions for AI, which I shared in a previous blog post, and I explained how I built it. I built the document by scraping basically my blog posts, Adobe's instructions, and a model repository with great code examples in it, and turned it into one big document called Instructions for AI, and I add that to my model. This is an encyclopedia that lets Claude understand the EDS in more detail if it needs more information. Having added all of those things together, I then resync my index. My index is now up to date, so Cursor now knows about the external encyclopedia, and Claude will now know about Edge Delivery Services and my way of developing for Edge Delivery Services. And finally, there are things called notepads. If you enable notepads are fragments of instructions that you can share across projects. So if you're working on something and you have a feature set that you want to repeat a subroutine, you can put it into a notepad. I have disabled Windows Control Panel. I have enabled long context chat. I have a long chat with Cursor and Claude when I'm working on these things. And I've also allowed the AI review panel to be available. So that's what you do to set up Cursor to make it ready for you to work with AI. So I'll shut down the Cursor settings. I have here a markdown file, which is an AI prompt, and I treat this like a programming language. It is a programming language. It's English telling a computer what to do. And programming has always been about using English to tell a computer what to do. You think about beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, BASIC, for I equals 1 to 10. And you are speaking in English and you're telling it to loop across values from 1 to 10. So when you're creating in the modern world, we are now using detailed English to tell an AI what you want. So I have here a title, a showcaser block. It's an AI prompt. It's my prompt. I created it in 2024 and it's version 1. The goal is to create a Franklin block named Showcaser that displays a visually appealing showcase for code. This is the intended design. Key features, the requirements, etc., etc., etc. All of these will be in the blog post afterwards. So I have got a UI and some statements that say what you would like to do when you are feeding the AI. Oh, I forgot to mention the AI panel over here. There are 3 things that you can do. You can chat with the AI. So if I were to go to somewhere like, let me go to the scripts folder in go into scripts folder and look at scripts.js. Because I'm in scripts.js, it's highlighted it and put it up on the top level here. I can also click and add other files as well into the chat space and say work with these too. But I'll just go in here and say explain this file. And you have to be able to type to do this job. So Claude and Cursor go off together and give you an understanding of what the file does. And it tells you what its main functions are, it tells you constants and configuration, utility functions. A really good introduction to what's going on here. I've integrated Sidekick into mine and I've done a few little changes to my scripts.js. So it's not exactly the same as the one that came off of Adobe, but it says here it's done a Sidekick integration. It includes logic to suppress header and footer. It's remarkably clever. You can chat and ask it any questions about the code base. So if I were to come out of there, start again, actually I can do a new chat, that's easier, and say at codebase, where do blocks get instantiated? So Claude Cursor looks at the whole code base. I've actually accidentally asked it to look at the web as well. Anyway, it's come up with the answer. Based on the information provided, the key points about how blocks are instantiated in ADS. Blocks are core components, and the main entry point is load lazy, do all of this. Load blocks. The load blocks function will look for elements with data block name, etc., etc. So it's giving you a good description. You can ask it all sorts of questions about your code base, what you're working on, or any old chat that you like in the chat box without using any of your Claude credits. So in the Composer, I'll just switch all of these down. In the Composer, you can, once again, chat, add files, do what you like. But in my case, I'm going to give it a command and ask it to run one of my prompts. I showed you earlier, I have prompts in a prompt folder, and my work in progress, I have showcaser.md. This is the prompt that I showed you earlier. I'm telling it, you're an expert Franklin developer. This is the Showcaser block. AI prompt, me, goal, UI design, etc., etc. So I've given it enough of a prompt to let it work with the rules file and the encyclopedia to build what I want. So I shall ask here at, and then a list of things that I can add: files, folders, code, web, docs, Git, code base, or a notepad. I can pull all of these things and throw them into the chat. I'm going to use a file, and I'm going to use showcaser.md. So that's added that file to the chat. If I just press return, it will read and execute the contents. Certainly, I'll create the showcaser block. It's going to create showcaser.js, showcaser.css, readme.md, and demo.md. Let's begin with the JavaScript file. Now let's create the CSS file, then the README. And finally, the demo.md file. Okay, it says it meets the requirements you specified and then tells me what the requirements were in outline. So here I can either reject, save, reapply, or accept. I'll accept everything that it said. It's now created some JavaScript and some CSS which match, and the JavaScript and CSS have been structured. We have CSS variables, which are great for keeping the CSS nice and tidy, and the JavaScript similarly has a config variable with all of its constants at the top, and everything that I asked for in my cursor rules and my prompt. I have a README which tells me how it works. It would tell an author how to create stuff, and it would tell a developer how to change stuff. And finally, a demo page, which gives me a complete and utter demo of how everything works together. So I've got those files. Now what I'd like to do is to get Claude to review what it's done, because I can see that it's done things like pre, JavaScript example, end pre. Now those aren't right. I never asked for those pre's. So if I ask it to at command, I have special commands that I fire, and I prefix them with command. I got command review, command senior, command comments, command engineer. These are commands that I can apply to the code base. My command review will review the set of things that are currently open, and that's up here, all of the files that have just been created. So I'm going to ask Claude Cursor to review those files. Over time, I've discovered that Claude Cursor forgets things. And it forgets commands like don't use pre's, you're not working in the world of HTML, you're working in the world of Franklin. And what it should do is fix each of the files and make sure that the mistakes that it made in its first pass are fixed by the review pass. It's regenerating the JavaScript by removing unused imports. It's using consts. It's adding ARIA attributes. It's organized the CSS variables. It's in the README. It's going to replace the pre-tags with single backticks, and the same on the demo, because both the demo and the README were actually constructed wrongly. But because I understand the mistakes that Claude Cursor can make, my review is forcing it to take those mistakes back and fix them. So once it's finished, it's going to say, do you want to accept everything? Yes, I do. So now my examples no longer have pre-tags and my demo is set up. So this is quite clever. It's a full page of Edge delivery services written in Markdown. So if I command C and go to my browser and bring up a new browser tab and go to my G drive, create the untitled document. I know I've got something in here already, but if I replace that by paste from Markdown, this is the actual code that was in that demo.md all ready to go. So I return back to here. The final thing I would like to do is to ask Claude Cursor to act as a senior at command -senior dot MD. senior.md return. In this case, what Claude Cursor will do, it's going to do a senior developer code review for the showcaser block. And I'm going to ask it to give me learnings and pointers that would help a junior build a better version if they wanted to learn more about how it was built. While it's doing that, earlier on it created the self-review, and the self-review was the usual mistakes that Claude Cursor would make while it's creating code for me. It's looking for unused imports, it's using consts for variables that are not reassigned, it's added ARIA attributes, it's improved focus management, it's organized the CSS variables, it's replaced pre-tags, and it's telling me what it did. So this is very, very good for a self-review. I shall accept this senior review, and then we can see what it says here. The showcaser block is well implemented Franklin component, and it tells me what's happening and how you might want to make things better. It's giving detailed areas for improvement, detailed recommendations, update buttons. It's telling you performance optimization you may want to make, code modularity and reusability, documentation, comments. It's acting as a senior and saying, well, if you want to do stuff, this can help you. It's also telling you about learning resources that you can go to learn more about web performance, to learn more about the web accessibility or JavaScript design patterns. So, and it's giving you some questions. You know, have you considered implementing syntax highlighting for the code snippets? Yeah, I'm going to do that in a minute. Is there a reason for simulating an asynchronous operation and decorate? Okay. Have you thought about adding a search functionality? It's quite good. It's given me a senior viewpoint. So now let's see what the code actually looks like. I can perform an AEM up in my terminal. And I have set, whoops, should shut this down. I have set the internal web browser, which is Shift Command P on this machine, start a browser, to go to the untitled document. And it was the untitled document that I just filled in my Google Drive a minute ago. And it's showing me here what this showcase looks like. This is a sample paragraph code showcase JavaScript example. And here, and we can copy it to the clipboard, how it works, customization. It's beginning to look like what we wanted. And in fact, I'm looking at it in a mobile view, so I can turn it into the desktop view. It's not quite what I wanted. I wanted the left panel to have a collapse and expand, and I wanted colorization in the right panel. But you can go through the chat process and say, add a collapse panel function and indicator to the left panel. So it even works out why I want to do this. It will provide more space for the code display when needed. I'll update the JavaScript and CSS files to implement this feature. Let's update the showcaser.js. Let's update the CSS. These changes add collapse, etc. Now it's waiting for me to say accept or reject. So if I accept everything, it refreshes the web browser, because that's the way it's meant to work, and I still don't have the collapse. Oh, the collapse is not working. So it's had a guess at why it's not working. It can't actually see the contents of that file, so that's interesting. It's going to try and fix it by guessing. So once again, we'll accept all of these. Aha! So now we have a collapse button, and if I collapse, it goes small, and if I go large, it goes large. So you can see that you can debug in English, you can tell it that things don't work, you can tell it to have a look and try and work out what's going on, and Claude Cursor will have a reasonably good stab at making this happen. I would go on and continue to do things like colorize the text on the right hand side and make my titles not contain any code, etc. Just by saying things like, I want the title to be the textual part ignoring code statements, etc., etc. You would continually feed prompts until Claude Cursor gets what you want. So it's going to update the logic for extracting the title from the code content. So let's see what it does with that. It hasn't quite worked, but we go through the process and we say things like update the demo file, etc., etc., going round and round the loop until we end up with what we want. Now this is going to be boring for you to sit and watch me teach an AI what I would like from my code. I could have created a much more detailed prompt, and the prompt would have created things like colorize, choose the languages, make sure that the titles are proper, but then I wouldn't have had a demonstration to show you. So what I've done is given it a simple prompt, and the simple prompt has produced 90% of what I wanted. The next 10% is going to come from tweaking and looking at the prompts. And at the end of the day, once you've got what you want, you could ask it to review its own prompt at command. I have got command engineer.md. If I ask it to do a command engineer, you are now in charge of looking at the prompts, and the prompt that I wanted was showcaser.md. And what the prompt engineer does is it looks at the prompt, it looks at the code, and it tells you how to change the prompt to get to the code that you've got. So if you've spent a few hours tweaking and fiddling with Claude Cursor, and then you want to get these things to be back so that they are good for the future, you can say have a prompt review and have a modified prompt. So the prompt review is going to tell us in here, we can see the prompt review is turning up. Wait until this says accept everything. Accept all. So if I look at the prompt review, it's telling me what Claude thought of my prompt. It outlines the core functionality and requirements, however, it lacks specificity in some areas, etc., etc. It tells me how to fix it and gives me resources and references. Very, very good. So how would Claude have written the prompt? So it's given a version 2. It's still my name. I'm the controller of the AI. So it read my showcaser block prompt and went to a version 2 and changed it and it's added fresh information in here to get to the point where the code now is. So if I was to spend hours and said, well, what should I have asked you for in the first place? Claude Cursor will tell me what I should have asked for in the first place, which is absolutely magic. Once you've got what you want, you can then get Claude Cursor to give you a template for a prompt, and then you can tell Claude Cursor in the future to read that template and create new templates using that as the base. So it's like having a senior developer working on your team, looking over your shoulder saying, I wouldn't quite do that, I'd change that, perhaps want to learn a little bit about this. And at the end of the day, you end up with a really, really, really good system. So I'll switch over to my production environment, and I'll show you what the final system looks like after I've spent 2 hours training the AI. I have part 11 of my blog, which I'm going to release as part of this sequence. And what it is, it's the showcaser. And I have lots and lots of code in here. This is the final version, what it looked like, how it all works. Now, if I preview that, you will see we have the thing that I described in the first place. We have a collapsible frame, which we can expand and close. We have a frame which will have copy markdown to clipboard. We can put JavaScript in there. If it's too long, you can expand it. If you scroll down to the bottom, there's a little bit here that says go back to the menu. You can't see it because it's hiding behind my face. I have a collapse function which lets you collapse the screen. In fact, if I just do this, you can see back to top, takes me to the top of the page. If I open this box and go down to the bottom, now it says return to menu. They actually overlap. I need to fix that. Collapse, and each of the different file types, CSS, JavaScript, have different color highlighting so that you can see what are strings, what are comments, etc. And an introduction that explains how it all works. So at the end of the day, this took me from that initial prompt that I showed you until I ran through the process. It took me about 2 hours to create this component, which does exactly what I want, and it means that my pages aren't filled with code. They have the showcaser, which lets me have my cake and eat it. I can show you the code, I can give you the code, you can copy it to the clipboard, you can paste it into your own Edge delivery services, you can do what you want with it. It's magic. It really is magic, and I'm very, very, very impressed with Claude Cursor and Edge delivery services. I did this entire component without writing a word of code. All I did was write English. Mind you, that's the way programming started. COBOL was invented as a way for business users to write computer programs in English without having to understand what computers were all about. I think you'll agree that the world is still in the same place. We are still trying to write what we want computers to do in English and get them to do it. It's a different skill set and a different way of thinking. You still have to be a programmer, a developer, a techie before you get and understand the English. So that's the end of my demo for today.